poor man saved a dying girl, unaware she was a millionaire's daughter. The little girl was not breathing. She was face down in the mud at the edge of the road, her pale blue dress soaked completely through, her small hand stretched out in front of her like she had been reaching for something when she went down. The rain was coming so hard and so fast that the road was already flooding. Cars were passing, their headlights cutting through the dark, every single one of them slowing slightly, then speeding up again and disappearing into the storm. They all passed. Every single one. And then one set of headlights slowed down and stopped. The vehicle that pulled over was not a nice car. It was a rusted 2003 Ford pickup truck with a cracked windshield, a side mirror held on with silver duct tape, and a dent in the rear bumper that had been there so long it had started to rust over. The man who stepped out into the rain was wearing paint-stained work boots, old jeans, and a jacket with a hole at the elbow. He had $11 in his wallet. He had not eaten a proper meal since breakfast. He dropped to both knees in the mud beside the child, without a single second of hesitation. He did not know who she was. He did not know her name or where she had come from or how she had ended up here on the side of this road in the dark. He had absolutely no idea, none whatsoever, that the little girl lying in the mud in front of him was the only child of one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in the entire state of Ohio. He only knew one thing. She was a child, she needed help, and he was there. What followed over the next 72 hours would cost this man almost everything he had. It would drag him through humiliation, injustice, and a cruelty he never saw coming from a direction he never expected. It would take him to the very bottom. And then, in a twist that nobody, not one single person in this story, saw coming, it would give him back something so much greater than anything he had lost that he would spend the rest of his life unable to fully explain it. Stay with me. Do not go anywhere, because this story is going to reach inside your chest and squeeze. And if it does, and I already know it will, hit that like button right now, share this video with someone who needs to believe in people again today, and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. Now, let me take you all the way back to the beginning. His name was Danny Cooper, 41 years old. He lived alone in a 2-room apartment on the east side of Columbus, Ohio, in a building where the elevator had been broken since August of last year, and nobody had called anyone to fix it because the landlord lived in Phoenix and responded to maintenance requests the way most people respond to spam mail, which is to say, he did not respond at all. Danny's apartment was small, 2 rooms, a bathroom, a kitchen that was technically part of the living room if you were being generous about definitions. The walls were thin enough that he had learned the life story of the couple in 4B entirely against his will. The heat worked inconsistently. The window in the bedroom had a draft that no amount of weather stripping had ever fully solved. But the apartment was clean. Danny kept it clean. His father had taught him that. A man's space tells you who he is, his father used to say. Keep yours honest. Danny painted houses for a living. Exterior, interior, commercial, residential, whatever came in. He had started at 19, working alongside his father, learning the trade the slow way, the real way, watching how his father moved around a room, how he treated a surface with patience and care, how he left every job cleaner than he found it. His father had died 6 years ago, and Danny still used the same brand of brush his father had preferred. Some habits are how you keep someone alive. He was not rich. He was not even close to comfortable in the way that word usually gets used. A slow month could mean choosing between the electric bill and groceries, and Danny had made that choice more than once without complaining about it to anyone. What he had, and this is the thing about Danny Cooper that you need to understand before anything else in this story makes sense. What he had was a way of being in the world that his father had built into him, so deep it was more like bone than belief. He paid attention. He did not walk past things. He noticed the elderly woman on the second floor who hadn't taken her newspaper in for 2 days and knocked on her door. He noticed when the kid from the third floor was sitting on the front steps at 10 p.m. on a school night looking like someone had knocked the air out of him. And he sat down beside him and didn't say anything until the kid was ready to talk. He was the kind of man a neighborhood quietly depends on, the kind that doesn't get speeches or awards, the kind that just keeps showing up. He had a dog named Biscuit, part beagle, part total mystery, who slept at the foot of his bed and rode on the passenger seat of the truck and was, if Danny was being completely honest, his closest companion and his best listener. On the evening of October 14th, Danny was driving home from a job in the suburbs. It had been a long day. A full repaint on a colonial in Gahanna, ceilings, trim, 2 accent walls the homeowner had changed her mind about twice. He was tired in the specific way that comes from careful physical work, that honest deep muscle tiredness his father had also taught him to respect. The storm that had been threatening all day had arrived around 6 p.m. and arrived with conviction. Rain like a wall, lightning somewhere in the distance. The roads were slick and the visibility was poor, and Danny had the heat going, and the radio low and Biscuit's head resting on his thigh, and he was thinking about the half can of tomato soup in the cabinet, and whether that counted as dinner or as giving up. He was maybe 3 miles from home when his headlights swept across something on the shoulder of the road. A shape small, dark against the wet gravel. He almost kept going. The human brain makes these calculations in fractions of a second: trash bag, piece of tarp, nothing, keep moving. He had almost processed it as nothing. But something made him slow down. He would never be able to explain what that something was. He just slowed down, and he looked. And he saw the hand. A child's hand, small fingers half curled in the wet gravel, a pale blue sleeve soaked dark with rain. Danny Cooper was out of that truck before it had fully stopped moving. She was face down. He turned her carefully, gently, the way you handle something precious, onto her back. A little girl, 7, maybe 8 years old, dark wet hair across her face, lips with a faint blue tinge that made Danny's stomach drop. He pressed 2 fingers to the side of her neck, the way he'd learned years ago in a first aid course he almost hadn't signed up for, and felt a pulse. Faint, too faint, but present. She was breathing, barely, the smallest possible rise and fall of her chest. "Okay," Danny said out loud. He said it the way people say things when they need to hear a calm voice and there is no one else available to provide one. "Okay, I got you. I got you right here." He had a prepaid cell phone with 14 minutes of talk time remaining. He used 4 of them on 911. The dispatcher told him an ambulance was 12 to 15 minutes out. She told him not to move the child unless it was absolutely necessary. She told him to keep her warm. Danny looked at the little girl, at the rain coming down on her face, at her lips. He moved her. He picked her up the way you carry something that might break, cradling her head against his shoulder, and he got her into the cab of the truck. He turned the heat all the way up. He took off his jacket, the one with the hole in the elbow, the only warm layer he had on, and wrapped it around her. He buckled her in against him so his body heat could reach her, and he put one hand lightly on her back, and he talked to her the entire time. Constant and low and steady. "You're okay. You are safe. I have you. Help is coming. You're not alone. I'm right here. You are going to be okay." He talked to her for 11 minutes. She never opened her eyes, but somewhere around the 7th minute, something happened that Danny Cooper would remember for the rest of his life. Her fingers, the small ones that had been half open in the gravel, moved slowly and then closed, wrapped around the cuff of his flannel shirt. Her whole tiny fist closed around that cuff and held on. Danny had to press his mouth into a flat line and look very hard at the rain on the windshield. Biscuit, who had been pressed quietly into the far corner of the seat, put his nose very gently against the girl's knee and stayed there. The ambulance arrived in 12 minutes. The paramedics moved fast and efficient. Hypothermia, they said, possible head trauma from a fall. They needed to go now. One of them paused just long enough to look at Danny, soaking wet, no jacket, covered in mud from the knees down, and said, "You did good, sir." Danny nodded. He gave them his name and his phone number. He watched the ambulance doors close. He stood in the rain until the lights disappeared. Then he got back in the truck, put it in gear, and drove to his apartment, where he ate tomato soup cold from the can because he forgot to heat it, and sat on his second-hand couch for a long time before he could sleep. He did not think of himself as someone who had done anything special. He thought about those fingers holding his cuff. He thought about her lips and the color they had been. He thought, "I hope she's okay. I really, really hope she's okay." He did not sleep well. 31 miles across Columbus, in a neighborhood where the houses don't have numbers so much as names, a man was sitting in a hospital waiting room and coming apart at the seams in the quietest, most controlled, most desperate way imaginable. His name was Robert Calloway. 55 years old. He had started with nothing, a fact he mentioned in interviews often enough that it had become part of his brand, and built Calloway Development Group into one of the largest real estate firms in the Midwest. His name was on buildings, literally on buildings in steel letters 4 feet tall. He employed 312 people. His net worth, as of the previous fiscal year, sat at $246 million. He was the kind of man who, when he walked into a room, the room reorganized itself around him. Not because he demanded it, because he had spent 30 years moving through the world as if outcomes were negotiable if you applied enough force and enough intelligence, and he had been right often enough that it had become a kind of gravity. He had a security team. He had lawyers on retainer. He had an assistant who could get him on the phone with the governor's office within the hour. And his daughter was missing, and none of it mattered. None of it did a single thing. Her name was Grace. 7 years old. She had her mother's eyes, dark and curious and lit from inside with something that looked like permanent delight about the world. Her mother, Catherine, had died of ovarian cancer 26 months ago, and Robert Calloway, who had faced down bankruptcy, hostile takeovers, and a federal audit without visibly flinching, had not fully recovered from that. He suspected he never would. Grace was all he had left of Catherine. Grace was, if he was being fully honest in a way he was only ever honest with himself at 3 a.m., the only reason he had kept going at all. She had been in the car with her nanny, Patricia, that afternoon, a routine trip to a music lesson on the other side of the city. A delivery truck had run a red light and hit them on the passenger side at 40 miles per hour. Patricia was in surgery with a fractured pelvis. The car had been destroyed. Grace had not been wearing her seatbelt, not because she was careless, she was 7, but because she had dropped her stuffed rabbit on the floor and leaned down to get it at the exact wrong moment, and Patricia had said, "Just a second, baby, we'll stop," and had not stopped yet when the truck came through the intersection. Grace had been thrown from the vehicle. She had not been found at the scene. For 4 hours and 17 minutes, Robert Calloway's entire machine, security team, private investigators, Columbus PD, 2 helicopters, and every contact he had ever accumulated across 30 years of being a powerful man, had been deployed to find a 7-year-old girl in a rainstorm. Not one of them found her. A broke-house painter in a rusted truck who hadn't eaten a real dinner found her. When the hospital called Robert's assistant and reported that a child matching Grace's description had been brought in by a man named Danny Cooper, Robert Calloway stood up from that waiting room chair so fast it fell over behind him. His security team had to jog to keep up with him. He ran, this man who had not run anywhere in 20 years, down 2 hospital corridors and through 2 sets of double doors and into the pediatric ICU. And there she was. Small and pale and hooked to 3 different monitors, her dark hair still slightly damp, a bruise forming across her left temple, but breathing, stable. The doctor used the word lucky twice in 30 seconds, and Robert Calloway, who did not believe in luck and had spent his life proving that outcomes were the product of force and will and intelligence, said nothing, because there was nothing to say to that. He sat beside her bed. He held her hand. He did not move for a very long time. After a while, he looked up at the nurse. "The man who found her, Danny Cooper, where is he?" "He went home, Mr. Calloway," the nurse said, a little carefully, like she wasn't sure how he would take that. "He left his phone number in case the police needed a statement." Robert looked at his daughter's face, at the bruise, at her hand in his. "Get me his address," he said. Danny was eating cereal the next morning, dry, because he'd run out of milk 3 days ago and kept forgetting to buy more, when there was a knock on his door. He opened it expecting his neighbor from 3A, who borrowed things on a rotating schedule. Instead, there were 2 large men in dark suits who were very clearly not from this building or this neighborhood, and behind them, a tall man in a long coat with the kind of bone-tired, red-eyed, clenched-jaw face that you only get from a night where you were not sure your child was going to make it. "Danny Cooper," the tall man said. "Yeah," Danny said. The tall man's voice did something complicated. He controlled it, but not completely. "You found my daughter last night." Danny was quiet for a moment. "The little girl in the rain," he said. "She's yours." "Her name is Grace," Robert Calloway said. "She's going to be okay. The doctors say she's going to be completely okay." He stopped. Something moved through his face that all his years of controlling rooms and controlling outcomes had not prepared him to control. "I need you to know that, and I need to say thank you, in person, because there is no other adequate way to say it." Danny looked at this man, at the suit, at the men behind him. He looked at his own apartment doorway, the peeling paint on the frame, the mat that said welcome that he'd had for 7 years, and he felt the vast distance between their 2 lives like a physical thing. "She held on," Danny said. "That's all she held on the whole time." Robert Calloway nodded. He had to look away for a moment. He came inside. He sat on Danny's second-hand couch. Biscuit put his head in the man's lap within 45 seconds, which was Biscuit's most reliable character judgment system, and one Danny had learned to trust. They talked for almost 2 hours. Robert told Danny about Catherine, about Grace, about the rabbit she dropped and the seatbelt and the intersection and the 4 hours of not knowing. He talked the way a man talks when he has been holding something enormous alone for too long and the walls finally come down. Danny told Robert about his father, about the brush, about honest work, about the rain and the headlights and the hand in the mud. Before he left, Robert Calloway took out a checkbook. "I want to do something for you," he said. "I want to do something real." Danny shook his head. "I don't need anything." "I know you don't need it," Robert said, "but I need to give it. Please let me do this." Danny thought about it for a long moment. "Buy yourself something," he said finally. "Something that isn't for the company or for the image. Something just because it makes you and Grace happy. That's what I'd want." Robert stared at him. "Just that," Danny said. "That's all I want." Robert Calloway put the checkbook away. He stood up. He put out his hand and Danny shook it. "I'm going to remember you, Danny Cooper," Robert said. "Remember Grace," Danny said. "Just take good care of that little girl." Robert nodded and left. Danny closed the door. He finished his dry cereal. He thought, "I'm glad she's okay. I am so glad she is okay." He did not think this was the end of something. He did not think it was the beginning of something. He just thought, "She's okay. That's enough." He was wrong. This was not the end. In fact, the most important part of this story hadn't even started yet. 3 days later, Danny Cooper got a phone call that changed everything. It was from the homeowner in Gahanna, the colonial he'd just finished repainting. Her name was Linda Marsh, and she had the clipped, precise voice of someone who had decided they were angry before they picked up the phone. "Mr. Cooper," she said, I'm calling because several items are missing from my home." Danny's stomach dropped. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "A gold bracelet from my bedroom dresser," she said, "and $240 in cash from my kitchen drawer." "I didn't touch anything in your home," Danny said. "I was there to paint. That's all I did." "You were the only one there," she said. "I'm filing a police report." She hung up. Danny sat very still with the phone in his hand. The police came to his apartment 2 days later. Polite and professional and doing their job, they said. Just a report to follow up on, they said. But they looked around his apartment. They asked him questions. And Danny saw in their faces the specific blankness of people looking at a poor man in a small apartment and running an easy calculation. He had no alibi beyond his own word. He had been alone in that house for 6 hours. There were no cameras. Word got around the way it does. 2 more clients canceled their upcoming jobs before the week was out. One of them, a man Danny had worked for 3 times before, a man who had always said Danny did the best work he'd ever seen, sent a 2-line text that said simply, "Heard some things, going to go another direction. No hard feelings." No hard feelings. Danny lost 4 jobs in 8 days. His phone stopped ringing. His rent was due in 11 days. He sat in his apartment one night and did the math on a piece of paper the way his father had taught him, honestly, clearly, no rounding in your favor. The numbers were not good. He had never been a man who scared easily. But fear has a particular texture when it is financial, when it is the creeping understanding that the floor beneath you is not as solid as you thought, and that texture was very present in that apartment that night. He almost called Robert Calloway. He had the number. He had been given it that morning on his couch. He did not call. He was not that kind of man. His father had been very clear about that kind of man. You do not do good things and then collect on them. You do not save a child and then show up with your hand out. The doing of the thing is the thing. That's all. So he sat with it. He sent out more estimates. He knocked on doors. He kept his name clean the only way he knew how, by continuing to be exactly who he was and waiting for the truth to be louder than the lie. He waited. And then the twist came. And it came from somewhere nobody, not Danny, not Robert Calloway, not you, is going to see coming. It was Grace who told him. Not Grace, the 7-year-old. She didn't know anything about Linda Marsh or missing bracelets or Danny's collapsing business. It was Grace's stuffed rabbit. Stay with me, because this is where the story turns completely. 3 weeks after the accident, Robert Calloway got a call from the salvage yard where his daughter's destroyed car had been towed. They were clearing it out before crushing it. Did he want anything retrieved? The rabbit, he told them the rabbit. When they found it wedged under the back seat, they also found a small pink backpack that Grace had been carrying. And in the front zipper pocket of that backpack was a phone. A child's tablet, actually, the small kind, loaded with cartoon apps and audiobooks, with a built-in camera that Grace had been using that afternoon to take pictures of things out the car window the way 7-year-olds do when they have a camera and 30 minutes with nothing else to do. The tablet had been recording video. Not intentionally. Grace had propped it against the back of the front seat and turned on a video app and forgotten about it. She did this sometimes, recording nothing, recording the ceiling of the car, recording her own knee for 40 minutes. But this time the tablet had been pointed at the window. And the window had been pointed at the intersection. The tablet had recorded the moment of the accident. Robert Calloway watched the video. He watched his daughter bounce against the door. He watched her disappear from frame. And then, because the accident had knocked the tablet sideways, he watched something else. Through the car window, from that particular angle, before the screen went dark. He watched Linda Marsh's house painter, not Danny, the other one. Linda Marsh had hired 2 painters that week, Danny Cooper, who had done the interior work and finished and left, and a second man, a subcontractor, who had come back the following afternoon for touch-up work on the exterior trim. Robert Calloway's investigators had already established this. They just hadn't known why it mattered until now. The video on Grace's tablet, shaky, accidental, 14 seconds long, was time-stamped, and the timestamp placed it at the same afternoon that Linda Marsh had reported her items missing, the afternoon that Danny was nowhere near the house, the afternoon the second painter was there alone. It was not proof of theft, not by itself. But it was the thread, and Robert Calloway, who had built an empire by pulling threads until something unraveled, pulled it. Within 72 hours, his investigators had found that the second painter, a man with 2 prior theft charges that had been pleaded down, had pawned a gold bracelet matching Linda Marsh's description at a shop in Westerville 4 days after the job. The pawn shop had surveillance footage. The man's face was clear as day. Robert Calloway did not call the police, not first. He called Danny Cooper. Danny was in his truck, parked outside a hardware store, doing the math again on that same piece of paper, when his phone rang. An unknown number. He almost didn't pick up. "Danny, it's Robert Calloway." Danny was quiet for a second. "How's Grace?" he said. Robert made a sound, almost a laugh, but waited with something heavier. "She's good. She's better than good. She asked about you, actually. She calls you the man in the rain." Danny looked out the windshield. Biscuit was asleep. "That's a good name," he said. "I need to talk to you about something," Robert said. "I know about Linda Marsh. I know about the jobs you lost, and I need you to listen to me right now." He told Danny everything. The tablet, the video, the timestamp, the pawn shop, the other painter. There was a very long silence. "You didn't have to do that," Danny said finally. "Yes, I did," Robert said. "I mean, you didn't have to look," Danny said. "Danny," Robert said, and his voice was completely different now, stripped down to something real. "My daughter held onto your shirt in the dark in the rain, and you talked to her for 11 minutes and kept her alive and went home and ate cold soup alone. The least I could do was look." He paused. "The least." He paused again. "I'm sorry it took this long." Danny pressed his hand flat on the steering wheel and stared at the parking lot. "She actually asked about me," he said. "Every day," Robert said. "She wants to meet the man in the rain. She made me promise." Danny laughed. It came out a little rough and a little wet. Biscuit lifted his head and looked at him. "Okay," Danny said. "Okay." The charges against Danny were dropped. Linda Marsh, to her credit, made a public apology. Danny's reputation was cleared. His clients came back. 2 new ones came in from the cleared name, which is the strange arithmetic of how quickly things can reverse when the truth gets loud enough. But here is the part of this story that I've been building toward from the very beginning. Here is the thing that nobody saw coming. Not the money, not the reward, not the big check or the house or any of the things that stories like this one are supposed to end with. 6 months after the night in the rain, Robert Calloway invited Danny to his house for dinner. Grace's idea, she had asked for it specifically, in the way that 7-year-olds ask for things, which is to say without any awareness that it might be complicated and with complete confidence that it would happen. Danny came. He brought Biscuit because he didn't know what you brought to a dinner at a house like that, and at least Biscuit was universally acceptable. Grace opened the door. She was small, dark eyes, a gap in her front teeth from a tooth that had come out last week. She was wearing a yellow sweatshirt and had paint on her left hand that she said was from art class. She looked at Danny for a long moment with those dark, curious eyes. Then she said, "You talk to me." "In the rain, I couldn't answer, but I heard you. I heard everything you said." Danny Cooper, 41 years old, a man who had not cried in front of anyone since his father's funeral, got down on one knee in the doorway of Robert Calloway's $2 million house so that he was at eye level with this child. "I know you did," he said. I knew you were listening, that's why I kept talking." Grace nodded very seriously, like this confirmed something she had already decided. Then she grabbed his hand and pulled him inside to show him her rabbit. His name was Mr. Buttons. She had had him since she was 2. She wanted Danny to know this. She wanted him to hold Mr. Buttons so that Mr. Buttons would know he was safe, because Mr. Buttons had been in the accident too, and sometimes she thought he was still scared. Danny held Mr. Buttons very carefully and told him he was safe. Grace watched this with complete satisfaction. Robert Calloway stood in the doorway of the living room watching this man, who had nothing, hold his daughter's rabbit and tell it that everything was okay. And something happened to his face that his assistant, who had worked for him for 11 years, had never seen happen before. He smiled, not the press conference smile, not the boardroom smile, something older and simpler and real, the kind of smile that belongs to a person rather than a position. They had dinner. Biscuit ate better than he had in months. Grace asked Danny 47 questions, he counted, because he was that kind of man, about painting houses, about Biscuit, about whether he was afraid of heights, about what his favorite color was and why, and whether he thought dogs dreamed. "I think Biscuit dreams about chasing things he never actually catches," Danny said, "and I think in the dreams he always catches them, and I think that's enough for him." Grace thought about this very seriously. "That's nice," she said. "Yeah," Danny said, "I think so too." People ask what Robert Calloway did for Danny. The answer surprises them because it is not what they expect. He did not give him a house. He did not give him a check with many zeros. He did not make him a vice president of anything or put his name on a building. What Robert did was this. He told the story, everywhere, in every room where he had influence and power and an audience who looked up to him. He told the story of the man in the rain. He told it at industry dinners and in board meetings, and once, unexpectedly, in a speech to 300 of his own employees. The maintenance staff, the cleaning crews, the drivers, the people who held up the floor of his operation. And he told them that the most important thing he had seen in the last year was a man with $11 and a hole in his jacket stop on a dark road and choose to look. "Success is not just about what you build," he said. "It's about what you stop for." For Danny, the work came back. More of it. Better clients. A reputation that had been cleaned and then polished by the kind of word of mouth that money cannot buy and decency sometimes earns. He hired 2 part-time workers inside of a year. He bought a second-hand truck that was slightly less rusted. He still uses the same brand of brush his father preferred. Grace still asks about him. She drew a picture of him for a school project about someone she admired. It showed a man standing in the rain next to a truck, and in the drawing the rain was bright yellow instead of gray, and when her teacher asked why, Grace said, "Because it didn't feel dark. It felt like someone turned the lights on." Her teacher kept the picture. Danny has a copy of it, framed, on the wall of his apartment above the second-hand couch. Biscuit sleeps on the floor below it. "I want to ask you one question before you go. When was the last time you slowed down? Not stopped because you had to, not pulled over because the law required it, but slowed down because something at the edge of your vision told you to look, and you listened to that something." We live in a world that rewards speed, that measures success by how far you have gotten and how fast. We are moving so quickly, most of us, that the edges of the road have become a blur. The shapes there, the ones that might be nothing, that might be a trash bag, that might be a child, they pass before we have finished deciding what to do about them. Danny Cooper had $11 and a hole in his jacket and a dog, and a can of soup waiting at home. And he stopped. He got on his knees in the mud. He gave a stranger his jacket. He talked to a child he didn't know, in the dark, in the rain, for 11 minutes, because she needed to hear that she was not alone. He did not do it for a reward. He did not do it because someone was watching. He did it because his father had taught him that some things are not decisions, they are just who you are. And Grace heard him. Through the cold and the dark and the fear she was in, she heard his voice and she reached out and she held on. That is not a small thing, that is everything. The rain in her drawing is yellow because it didn't feel dark. It felt like someone turned the lights on. Think about who might be at the edge of your road right now. Not literally, but in your life, your workplace, your neighborhood, your family. Who is face down and hopping that someone, anyone, slows down and looks. You don't need $240 million to turn the lights on for someone. You need $11 and the willingness to stop. If this story moved you, and I believe with everything in me that it did, please share it right now. Not for the numbers, but because someone in your life is moving too fast right now and needs to hear about the man in the rain. Someone needs to be reminded that ordinary people do extraordinary things every single day, without applause, without cameras, without anyone knowing. Subscribe if you haven't already. Every week, I bring you stories like this one. Stories about what human beings are really made of when it counts. Until next time, slow down, look at the edges, and if something tells you to stop, stop. You have no idea what you might find there.